At my wedding, my best friend caught the bouquet, then dropped to one knee, pulled out a ring, and proposed to her boyfriend while everyone cheered. I just stood there, empty-handed, realizing my once-in-a-lifetime moment had just been hijacked. I always thought I'd be the kind of bride who would just be floating on a cloud, too happy to notice any little mishaps. And for most of the day, I was. Our wedding was last month at a restored Victorian mansion that I'd been obsessed with since college. I remember stepping out of the vintage Rolls-Royce in my lace dress, seeing all the twinkling fairy lights strung across the garden, and thinking, this is exactly how I dreamed it. Everything had gone so well, better than well, actually. My dad managed to get through his speech without crying too hard, the caterer didn't forget the vegetarian meals, and even my notoriously flaky cousin Kayla showed up on time. For once, the universe seemed to be cooperating. I should have known that was too good to last. The bouquet toss was one of those silly traditions I secretly loved. I'm not even embarrassed to admit that as a kid, I used to practice throwing imaginary bouquets in my bedroom mirror. It always looked like the most joyful moment, the bride sending a bit of her luck to someone else. So when the DJ announced it, I was buzzing with excitement. I was already picturing the photos, me mid-laugh, my friends reaching up with hopeful faces. As the single women gathered behind me, I caught sight of Sarah, my best friend since we were 13. She was in this dusty blue satin dress I'd picked out myself. She looked beautiful. She always did. But I noticed she was kind of fidgeting. She kept tucking her hair behind her ear and glancing over at her boyfriend, Tyler, who was standing near the bar looking both clueless and exhausted. I remember thinking, what is she so nervous about? Maybe she was just emotional, I told myself. She'd been acting a little off all day, like she was in on some private joke nobody else knew about. But I was too wrapped up in the moment to dwell on it. I clutched the bouquet of peonies and white roses, feeling the stems cool and damp in my hands. I looked over my shoulder and called out, ready? Everyone cheered. Someone, I think it was my coworker Jen, yelled, aim for me, and we all laughed. I took one last deep breath, smiled for the camera, and tossed the bouquet high into the air. And in that split second, when the music swelled and the petals fluttered like confetti, I really did feel like the happiest version of myself. If I'd known what Sarah was about to do the moment her fingers closed around those flowers, I probably would have just skipped the bouquet toss altogether. But in that perfect little bubble, right before it popped, I thought nothing could ruin this day. God, I was so wrong. I turned around just in time to see Sarah clutching the bouquet to her chest like she'd just caught the winning touchdown. She was flushed, breathing hard, eyes glittering under the string lights. The whole group erupted into applause. A couple of people were whooping and whistling. I clapped along, grinning, because that's what you do, your best friend catches the bouquet, it's cute, it's tradition. But then, instead of stepping back into the crowd or bringing the flowers over to show me, Sarah did something that made the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. She turned, walked briskly past the other girls, and stopped right in front of Tyler. I watched, blinking, trying to process why she was pulling something out of her dress, this little white velvet box she must have been carrying all day. For a second, I actually thought, maybe it's a joke. Maybe she's going to pretend to propose as a gag. But there was nothing funny in the way she looked up at him, her whole face going soft and serious. The DJ must have thought it was part of the plan, because he killed the music so suddenly the silence felt loud in my ears. Tyler, she said, voice trembling so much I could barely hear her, I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with anyone else. You're my best friend and the love of my life. Will you marry me? I swear to God, the world just froze. Someone near me gasped. Another person, maybe my cousin Anna, squealed, oh my God, like this was the most romantic thing she'd ever seen. Tyler stood there, eyes huge, mouth actually hanging open. He looked around like he wasn't sure if he was being pranked. I felt my smile slip right off my face. My cheeks went hot, and my stomach clenched in the sick, heavy way I can't really describe. This is happening, I thought. She's proposing. At my wedding. I could feel everyone's eyes flicking back and forth between them and me, trying to gauge my reaction. My husband, Ben, was standing next to me with his hand still awkwardly halfway up in a clap. He looked over at me like he was waiting for my cue. Was he supposed to cheer? Was this fine? It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I couldn't move or look away. Then Tyler finally shook himself and laughed nervously. Are you serious? He asked, voice cracking. Sarah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks, and held the ring box closer to him. Someone in the crowd started chanting, say yes. Say yes. And right then, all I could think was how I'd spent 14 months planning every detail of this day, every centerpiece, every song, every little moment, so it would feel special and beautiful. And now, that moment was being swallowed whole by a proposal that had nothing to do with me or Ben, or the vows we'd just made. Tyler took a deep breath. And then he said yes. The place exploded. People clapped, screamed, whistled, hugging each other like they were in a movie. My brand new husband tried to pull me into a hug, but my arms felt stiff, heavy. It was only when the DJ turned the mic back on and announced, "Let's hear it for our newly engaged couple," that I realized I hadn't said a word. I just stood there, empty-handed, bouquet gone, the spotlight gone, my perfect moment hijacked. And as everyone crowded around Sarah and Tyler, I thought, this is supposed to be my wedding. What the hell just happened? The cheering didn't stop. It felt like it went on forever, echoing off the high ceilings and bouncing around inside my skull. Sarah slipped the ring onto Tyler's finger. She must have guessed his size somehow, and then they hugged like they were the only two people in the world. Someone started yelling, "Kiss, kiss," and Tyler obligingly bent down and kissed her. The crowd roared again. I just stood there, plastering this brittle smile on my face that felt like it might crack off. My cheeks ached with the effort of pretending. Ben leaned in and murmured, "Babe, it's sweet, right? Kinda spontaneous." His tone was careful, like he was trying to soothe a wild animal. I swallowed, trying to get my voice to work. "Sure," I said, even though it sounded more like a question. "Is it sweet? Or is it unbelievably rude?" I looked around. Half our guests were now surrounding Sarah and Tyler, phones out, recording, snapping pictures. My florist, who was supposed to be gathering the extra arrangements for us to donate the next day, was taking photos of them too. I watched as my Aunt Linda dabbed her eyes and said something to Sarah I couldn't hear. A group of Ben's college friends, who I barely knew, were huddled near the bar, laughing and clinking glasses. My maid of honor, Jess, finally noticed me standing off to the side. She came over, slipping her arm through mine. "Hey," she said quietly. "You okay?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't actually know. Was I overreacting? Would people think I was petty for caring so much? I tried to picture myself telling the story later. Yeah, my best friend proposed to her boyfriend at my bouquet toss, and immediately felt a wave of embarrassment. Like it made me sound possessive or jealous. But it wasn't about that. It was about this day being the one day I didn't have to share the spotlight. The one day it could be about me and Ben and no one else. I took a deep breath and managed to say, "I'm fine." Jess didn't look convinced, but she squeezed my hand. "You don't have to pretend," she said. A moment later, the DJ's voice boomed through the speakers again. What an incredible surprise. "Congratulations to our happy couple. Let's all toast to Sarah and Tyler's engagement." And just like that, everyone reached for their glasses. I felt my throat tighten as I lifted my champagne flute. It was like I was watching from somewhere outside my own body, clinking my glass automatically while people around me cheered for a brand new engagement. The DJ didn't even try to bring it back to me and Ben. He launched straight into some upbeat song I didn't recognize, and the dance floor flooded with guests. Sarah caught my eye across the room and beamed, holding up her hand to show off the ring. Her mouth formed the words, "Thank you," like I'd somehow endorsed all this. And in that instant, my annoyance turned into something sharper, something closer to anger. I felt Ben's hand on my lower back, steadying me. "Let's dance," he said, his voice gentle. I nodded because I couldn't think of what else to do. I let him lead me to the floor, but as we started swaying, I couldn't stop glancing over his shoulder, watching Sarah bask in the applause that should have been mine. This is supposed to be my wedding, I thought again. But now everyone will remember it as the day Sarah got engaged. By the time the first dance was over, I'd convinced myself I could salvage the night. People would congratulate them, sure, but eventually they'd turn their attention back to us. It was still our wedding. It had to be. So when Sarah finally broke free from the crowd and came over, bouquet still clutched in her left hand, I took a slow breath and prepared my best gracious bride face. She threw her arms around me, nearly knocking me off balance. "Oh my God," she squealed in my ear. "I hope you're okay with this." It just felt so perfect. I pulled back, studying her face for any flicker of uncertainty or guilt. There was none. She looked purely thrilled, cheeks pink, eyes glossy. I heard myself say, "Congratulations," and even managed to smile. But inside, I felt hollow. She beamed. "You're not mad, are you?" I mean, everyone was here, and it was just so romantic. I couldn't wait. You could have waited, I thought. You could have waited literally one more day. But I didn't say it. Instead, I nodded and lied, "Of course not." "Best wedding ever," she gushed, glancing over at Tyler, who was talking to Ben and a couple of our groomsmen. "And now, best engagement ever. We'll always share this date." Share this date. Something about that phrasing made my jaw tighten. I felt Jess's hand on my arm, a silent reminder not to lose it in front of everyone. I had this sudden, vivid memory of Sarah's 30th birthday the year before. I'd spent hours helping her organize a rooftop dinner and surprise cocktails. I'd never dreamt of using her party to announce anything about me. It would have felt wrong. But apparently, she didn't see it the same way. The photographer walked up then, holding his camera at his side. "Mind if I get a few shots of the newly engaged couple?" he asked brightly, as if we were all in on some elaborate plan. Sarah clapped her hands together, her engagement ring flashing under the lights. "Yes! Oh my God, please." I stepped aside automatically, out of frame. I watched the photographer pose them, Sarah clutching the bouquet in one hand and Tyler's lapel in the other, both of them grinning. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a few of my older relatives, people I hadn't seen in years, wandering over to join the little engagement huddle instead of waiting to congratulate Ben and me again. I felt something sour bloom in my chest, this mix of humiliation and resentment I didn't know what to do with. Ben came over, putting his arm around my waist. He kissed my temple. "Let's sit down for a minute," he murmured. I nodded, grateful for an excuse to step away. We sank into a love seat tucked under an ivy arch, the music muffled by the draped fabric above us. For the first time since the ceremony, I felt like I could breathe. Ben looked at me carefully. "Talk to me." I pressed my lips together, trying to keep my voice from wobbling. "I don't want to be a brat," I whispered. "But I can't pretend I'm okay with this. It was supposed to be our day." He sighed, rubbing circles on my back. "You're not a brat." It was a lot. I rested my head on his shoulder, my gaze fixed on the dance floor where Sarah and Tyler were slow dancing, guests still filming them with their phones. Part of me felt petty, like maybe I was making too big a deal out of this. But another part of me knew this wasn't petty. This was about boundaries. About respect. And right then, in that quiet corner with Ben's arm around me, I realized no matter how hard I tried to be gracious, this night had changed something between me and Sarah. When Ben and I finally stood up, I pasted my polite face back on. The rest of the evening stretched out in front of me, a blur of dances and cake cutting and clinking glasses I'd once been excited for. But the atmosphere had shifted. It was subtle, like someone had tilted the floor by a few degrees, and everything was sliding just slightly out of place. During the cake cutting, my maid of honor Jess tried to get people's attention for a moment. She tapped her glass with a fork and yelled, "Okay, everyone. Time for the cake." People drifted over, but at least half of them were still gathered around Sarah and Tyler, who were showing off her ring to anyone who would look. I felt a pang of something sharp and cold in my stomach. Like I'd been replaced in my own story. I forced a smile as Ben and I cut into the cake, a lemon elderflower tiered confection I'd tasted 6 samples to choose. A few people clapped and snapped pictures. But behind them, I could see Sarah standing on tiptoe as she posed for yet another photo, bouquet still clutched in her hand like a trophy. When we handed plates of cake to guests, a distant cousin I hadn't seen since high school congratulated me. But then she added, "And Sarah's proposal, wow. So unexpected. You must be thrilled." Thrilled. I swallowed a dry laugh. "Sure," I said. "So happy for them." The cousin didn't notice my tone. She moved on, carrying her cake away. Ben leaned close. "Want me to say something to her?" I shook my head. I couldn't imagine what that conversation would even look like without exploding. Later, during the dancing, my favorite aunt, my mom's youngest sister, pulled me aside. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "don't let this overshadow your day. Everyone still knows this is your wedding." I nodded. But I didn't believe her. I could feel it every time someone came up to our table and said, "Congratulations," and then turned around to fawn over Sarah. It got worse when the DJ tried to get everyone out on the dance floor. He picked this upbeat pop song I'd specifically added to the playlist because I wanted to dance with my friends. But instead of dancing with me, they were clustered around Sarah, taking turns hugging her and squealing over the ring. I ended up dancing mostly with Ben and my younger cousins, trying to keep my spirits up. But even they kept stealing glances over at the spectacle unfolding near the bar. At one point, I caught Sarah's eye. She lifted her hand in a little wave, smiling like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't hijacked my wedding reception. I raised my glass to her because it was easier than ignoring her completely. But inside, something settled into place, this cold certainty that things between us were never going back to how they were. The final straw was the photographer. He came over toward the end of the night and asked if I wanted any more photos. "Yes," I said, maybe too quickly. "Can we get some with just Ben and me?" He hesitated. "Of course. I promised Sarah and Tyler we'd get a few more engagement shots before I pack up." I stood there stunned. Engagement shots. At my wedding. Ben put his hand on my elbow before I could say something I'd regret. "Let's just do our photos," he murmured. So we did. But the whole time, I felt like a guest at my own event, waiting for the real stars to step in front of the camera. When the last song finally played, and people lined up to say goodbye, I was exhausted in a way I didn't even know was possible. Sarah hugged me tightly one last time, whispering, "I love you so much." This was the perfect night. I hugged her back because I didn't know what else to do. But inside, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt with her. I woke up before the alarm, before the sunrise, before Ben even stirred beside me. My eyes felt swollen, and my head was heavy, like I'd spent the entire night crying even though I hadn't. I lay there in the quiet hotel suite, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night in my head on a loop I couldn't shut off. When Ben finally rolled over, he wrapped his arm around me and mumbled, "Morning, Mrs. Carter." I tried to smile, but the memory of Sarah's voice, "We'll always share this date," echoed so loud I couldn't hear anything else. While Ben showered, I picked up my phone, telling myself not to look. I lasted maybe 30 seconds before I tapped open Instagram. And there it was. Post after post after post, Sarah down on one knee, bouquet in hand. Tyler hugging her, the ring glittering on his finger. Sarah waving her left hand at the camera, tears in her eyes. The captions were all the same. He said yes. Best day ever. Engaged to my soulmate at the most beautiful wedding. She threw the bouquet straight to me, meant to be. I scrolled and scrolled, my stomach flipping like I'd had too much champagne all over again. I tried to find photos of us, Ben and me, the actual bride and groom. There were a few, buried between the engagement posts, but they already had fewer likes. I set my phone face down on the nightstand, pressing the heel of my hand against my forehead until I saw stars. Ben came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, hair damp. He took one look at me and didn't bother with a cheerful good morning. Want to talk about it? He asked gently. I shook my head. But the words just tumbled out anyway. I know it's stupid. But I feel like she stole something from me. It's not stupid, he said. He sat down on the edge of the bed, taking my hand. It was your day. And she made it about her. I took a deep breath. I don't want to fight with her. But I also can't pretend I'm okay with it. He nodded. Then don't. So I picked up my phone again and opened our text thread. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Finally, I wrote, hey, I love you, but I have to be honest, last night hurt me. I wish you'd asked me before proposing at my wedding. It felt like you took a moment I'd been dreaming about for years and made it about something else. I know you didn't mean to, but I can't pretend I'm not upset. I read it over twice, fighting the urge to delete it. Then I hit send. Almost immediately, the typing dots popped up. My heart pounded. I wasn't sure what I hoped she'd say, maybe an apology or even just acknowledgement. Her reply came fast. Sarah, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I honestly don't think it was a big deal. Everyone was so happy for us. I thought it made your wedding even more special. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. I'm sorry you feel that way. Not I'm sorry I did it. Ben was watching my face. What did she say? I handed him the phone. He read it, his jaw tightening. That's not much of an apology. I didn't answer. Because in that moment, I knew something I'd been avoiding all morning. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Sarah didn't think she'd done anything wrong. And maybe that was the part that hurt the most. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Ben and I checked out of the hotel, drove home in silence broken only by the occasional half-hearted attempt to talk about anything besides Sarah. I kept trying to convince myself it was over, that I could just file the whole thing away as an awkward memory. But every time I thought about the look on Sarah's face, so unbothered, so sure she hadn't crossed a line. I felt that same cold weight in my chest. When we got home, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the couch, still in my travel dress, scrolled through social media again even though I knew it would only make me feel worse. By then, people had started posting comments. Such a magical night. Can't believe we got to witness 2 love stories. Best engagement ever, so spontaneous. Iconic. She really made the wedding unforgettable. Unforgettable. They were right. I would never forget it. But probably not for the reason Sarah thought. Ben came and sat next to me. He didn't say anything, just took my phone out of my hand and set it on the coffee table. You don't have to decide anything right now, he said quietly. But I realized I already had. I'd spent years brushing off Sarah's habit of making herself the center of attention. The way she dominated birthday dinners, told stories that somehow always circled back to her, turned other people's milestones into her backdrop. I think I'd always believed it was just her way, harmless, maybe a little self-absorbed. Nothing malicious. But this wasn't harmless. This was my wedding. The one day I should have been allowed to be selfish without feeling guilty. And she couldn't even give me that. I didn't text her again that day. Or the day after. It wasn't that I wanted to end our friendship with a dramatic blow-up. I just couldn't pretend to feel the same. Something had shifted. When I think back on the night, there are still parts that make me smile. The way Ben looked at me when I walked down the aisle. My dad's shaky voice during his toast. The little flower girl who insisted on twirling her dress until she fell over giggling. But there's also this ache, this knowledge that the memory is forever tangled up with Sarah dropping to her knee with my bouquet in her hands. I know some people will say I'm being petty. That love is love, and I should be happy for her. And I am happy for her, just not at the expense of myself. If there's one thing this taught me, it's that boundaries matter. Even with the people you love. Maybe especially with them. So, am I overreacting? Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally seeing things clearly. Either way, I'm not going to apologize for feeling how I feel. Because this was supposed to be my wedding. And no one should have to share their day if they don't want to.